If you live in Canada, you're on Indigenous land. But what does that really mean? Today, we're going to go beyond the headlines to understand the distinct histories, cultures, and identities of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And trust me, this isn't just a history lesson. It's absolutely fundamental to understanding Canada today. Let's dive in.
So, I want to start by asking you a question. When you hear that word Indigenous, what comes to your mind? Is it a specific image, maybe a historical figure? For a lot of us, that word might bring up a single kind of generalized idea, but the reality is so much richer and more diverse than that. The truth is, there isn't one single Indigenous story. A much better way to picture it is as this vast, beautiful mosaic made up of hundreds and hundreds of unique tiles. And each one of those tiles represents a distinct nation with its own language, its own culture, its own history. That's why using the right terms matters so much. Today, we're going to zoom in on 3 of the largest and most distinct sections of that incredible mosaic. First up, let's talk about the First Nations, and that term itself tells you something super important. We're talking about many nations, plural. So, First Nations are the original inhabitants of the land we now call Canada, living south of the Arctic. And as you can see here, it's a huge umbrella term that covers an incredible diversity of peoples. I mean, think about the Haida Nation on the Pacific coast, famous for their breathtaking totem poles, versus the Mi'kmaq on the Atlantic coast with their own totally distinct language and spiritual traditions. Both are First Nations, but they're also sovereign peoples with their own unique cultures. And the scale of this diversity, it's truly staggering. We're not talking about a handful of communities here. We're talking about over 630 distinct First Nations in Canada. That's more than 50 unique languages, which means more than 50 completely different ways of understanding and describing the world. Their relationships with the Canadian government are just as varied, defined by historic treaties that are still legally binding today. This quote, it just perfectly captures a core worldview, doesn't it? For First Nations, the land isn't just a place to live. It's the source of their laws, their culture, their very identity. It's this deeply spiritual and foundational relationship. All right, so from the forests and plains, let's head way north to the vast and beautiful Arctic. This is the homeland of the Inuit, the people of the North. Now listen up, because this is a really important distinction. Inuit are not First Nations. They are a distinct people with a unique culture and a homeland that stretches across the entire Arctic. That whole area is called Inuit Nunavut. They're a circumpolar people, which means their communities and cultural ties actually span from Siberia all the way to Greenland. And just to give you a sense of the scale here, Inuit Nunavut, the Inuit homeland, covers a massive 1/3 of Canada's landmass. That is huge. Across this vast territory, Inuit are united by a shared culture and language, Inuktitut. And their relationship with the government, it's very different from many First Nations. It's defined by modern land claim agreements, not those historic treaties. Just like with First Nations, that connection to the land is everything. To an outsider, the Arctic might look like a harsh, maybe even empty landscape. But for the Inuit, no way. It's a provider, it's a home, and it's the very source of their identity. It's a place that has shaped generations of incredible resilience and ingenuity. And for our final piece of this incredible mosaic, we're turning to the Métis Nation, a unique Indigenous people whose story is all about emergence, about the creation of a brand new culture. The Métis have this very specific origin story, and it's tied directly to the North American fur trade. They emerged as a distinct people from the families created by European fur traders, mostly French and Scottish men, and First Nations women, especially from the Cree, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe nations. And from these unions, something amazing happened. A brand new, vibrant culture was born. This new culture just blossomed in the historic Northwest, centered around the Red River. It's this beautiful blend of traditions you can see in everything from their beadwork to their music. They even have their own language, Métis, which is so cool. It basically weaves together Cree verbs and French nouns. The Métis Nation has a proud history of political organization and resistance, fighting for their land, their rights, and their recognition as a distinct Indigenous people. This quote really gets to the heart of the Métis identity. It's not about being half and half. Not at all. It's about the birth of a completely new nation with a unique culture woven from 2 distinct traditions, built on this incredible foundation of strength and resilience. Okay, so we've looked at First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples as these distinct, separate groups. But you might be asking, why does this matter so much? Why is it so important to make these distinctions? Well, using a generic term like Indigenous without understanding who you're actually talking about, it isn't just inaccurate, it flattens everything. It erases the unique histories, the cultures, and the specific rights of each group. Recognizing these differences is the first and most crucial step toward genuine respect. We can't even begin to talk about reconciliation if we aren't willing to see and acknowledge the very real diversity of the peoples involved. This chart really helps to break it down. Just look at the differences in their legal bases. First Nations have the Indian Act and historic treaties, Inuit have modern land claim agreements, and Métis rights are actually enshrined in the Constitution. Their homelands are distinct, their languages are different. Lumping them all together just ignores these massive legal and cultural realities. And, this isn't just about being a good citizen, it's also a professional responsibility. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action number 92 specifically calls on the corporate sector to educate its staff on the history and diversity of Indigenous peoples. So if you're in the business world, guess what? Understanding these distinctions is part of doing business ethically and effectively in Canada today. It's that important. So where do we go from here? What can you actually do? Well, first, and this is a big one, use specific language. If you know you're talking about Inuit, say Inuit. Second, take a minute to learn whose traditional territory you live and work on. And third, just keep learning. Seek out books, films, and art created by First Nations, Inuit, and Métis artists and storytellers themselves.
So we'll leave you with this question to think about. Now that you've seen the complexity and the richness of this mosaic, how will it change the way you see Canada? How might it shape your conversations, your work, and your connection to the land you're on? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.